The Civil War had ended, but the soldier still carried its ghosts. One evening, he found a woman lying beside the river, torn dress, eyes full of pain. "Just kill me fast," she whispered, voice shaking. He froze, seeing the cruelty carved into her skin by outlaws who'd left her for dead. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. "No," he said softly, wrapping his coat around her. "You're not dying today." She looked at him with disbelief, tears mixing with dust. For the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him, something that felt almost like purpose again. He carried her to the shallow part of the river and washed the blood from her skin. Each movement was gentle, reverent, as if afraid she might shatter like glass. Her body trembled, but she did not pull away. The soldier's jaw clenched at the sight of the mark branded into her thigh, the crude symbol of a gang he knew well. He'd seen it burned into others during the war, on the innocent and the fallen alike. Rage flared deep inside him, but he kept his voice calm. "They won't touch you again," he said quietly. When he lifted her onto his horse, the sky had turned the color of dying embers. The road ahead was empty and endless. Each hoofbeat echoed through the quiet land, a rhythm older than grief. She rested against him, too weak to speak. He could feel the faint rise and fall of her breath, fragile, uncertain. Somewhere in the distance a wolf howled, and the soldier's hand went instinctively to the pistol on his belt. The woman stirred, whispering something he couldn't catch. "Rest," he murmured. "You're safe now." By the time they reached the cabin, night had swallowed the plains. It was an old place, half fallen, once belonging to a miner long gone. The soldier kicked open the door, laid her down on a cot and built a fire. The flames painted her face in flickers of gold and red. For the first time he saw her clearly, the strength hidden beneath the pain, the eyes that refused to close. "You should have left me," she said weakly. "Men like them don't stop." He met her gaze. "Neither do I." He boiled water, cleaned her wounds, and bound them with pieces torn from his shirt. When she winced, he murmured, "Easy now." Her voice cracked as she spoke again. "They were looking for me. Said I stole from them. I didn't." He gave a slow nod. "Doesn't matter now." For hours he worked in silence, his hands steady despite the ache in his chest. Outside, wind scraped against the cabin walls like ghosts demanding to be let in. Inside, two souls tried to remember what mercy felt like. When dawn broke, the woman was asleep, her breathing steadier. The soldier stepped outside, letting the cold morning air bite his skin. He looked toward the horizon, a line of pale fire over the distant hills. Somewhere beyond that light, the men who'd done this were still alive. He clenched his fists. He had promised himself after the war never to raise a gun again, unless it was for something that mattered. Now, looking at the sleeping woman, he knew what mattered. Later, when she awoke, he was by the river cleaning his rifle. "You plan to kill them?" she asked, voice low. He didn't answer right away. "If they come for you again, I'll be ready." She pushed herself upright, wincing. "You can't fight them all." He gave a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ma'am, I've been fighting ghosts since the day I put down my uniform." She stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to understand what kind of man would risk everything for a stranger. The days passed slowly. He hunted, cooked, and stayed near the cabin. Sometimes she helped where she could, though her leg made walking hard. They spoke little. Words seemed heavy in that place, yet the silence between them was not empty. One night as the fire crackled, she asked, "What was her name?" He looked up. "Who?" "The woman you lost." His hand froze halfway to his cup. "Her name was Clara," he said after a long pause. "She waited for me through the war. I came home too late." The woman nodded, eyes soft with understanding. "I lost someone too," she said. "My brother. They killed him when he tried to stop them." For a moment, the air between them trembled with shared sorrow. The soldier stared into the flames. "Maybe that's why we're both still breathing," he said. "So the dead don't have to carry the whole burden." She smiled faintly, the first real smile he'd seen on her face. Outside, the wind carried the sound of coyotes across the plains, a reminder that life, no matter how broken, still endured. By the 5th day, her wounds had begun to heal. She walked a few steps on her own, leaning on the wall for balance. The soldier watched from the doorway, arms crossed. "You're getting your strength back." She looked at him and nodded. "I'll leave tomorrow," she said quietly. His brow furrowed. "You got nowhere to go." "I can't stay," she replied. "If they find me here, they'll kill you too." He shook his head. "Let 'em come." But she saw the pain in his eyes, the ghosts that still haunted him, and she knew he was tired of losing people. That night, sleep didn't come easy. The soldier sat by the window, moonlight cutting across his face. He thought of the war, the screams, the smoke, the men he couldn't save, and now here was another life in his hands. A woman branded by cruelty, yet somehow still alive. He whispered into the dark, "God, if you got any mercy left, give it to her. I've had my share." In the bed behind him, the woman stirred, whispering his name for the first time. "James!" It was a name he hadn't heard spoken kindly in years. When dawn came, she was gone. Panic struck him like a bullet. He found her tracks in the dirt, leading toward the river. Saddling his horse, he rode hard through the trees until he saw her, standing on the bank, staring at her reflection. "You weren't supposed to follow," she said softly. "And you weren't supposed to walk away," he replied. Her eyes glistened with tears. "I can't stay with you, James. You deserve peace, and I'll only bring trouble." He dismounted, stepped closer. "Peace don't mean much if there's no one to share it with." The wind swept between them, carrying the scent of rain and pine. She looked at him for a long time, then nodded slowly. "Maybe just one more day," she whispered. He smiled, not with joy, but with something gentler, like hope rediscovered. Together they walked back toward the cabin, their shadows stretching across the empty land. For once, the soldier didn't think about the past or the men he'd lost. He only thought about the woman beside him, the stranger who'd asked to die and somehow made him remember why life was still worth fighting for. He carried her to an old miner's cabin and stayed by her side through long, cold nights. When she awoke, he was tending the fire, humming an old army tune. "Why save me?" she asked weakly. He didn't look up. "Because I'm tired of watching good people die." Slowly, the fear in her eyes gave way to trust. When dawn came, she whispered, "Maybe I don't want to die anymore." He smiled faintly, eyes glinting with tired hope. "Then live," he said. Outside, the prairie wind howled. But inside, two lost souls began to believe the world still held a little mercy. Days turned into weeks. Her strength returned in pieces, like scattered glass slowly being gathered and made whole again. The soldier James barely spoke of himself. When he did, his words were few and heavy. He told her about the war, the fields soaked in blood, the way men forgot how to be human. She listened quietly, sometimes touching the scars on his hands. "You saved lives back then too," she'd say softly. He shook his head. "Not enough." Each time she smiled, though, that answer seemed to matter a little less. Something in her eyes began to heal him too. The woman, Elena, she said her name was, helped where she could. She swept the cabin, cooked simple meals, even fed the horses when her leg allowed it. James would watch her from the doorway, a faint warmth growing in his chest. He wasn't used to company, not anymore. But something about her presence made the cabin feel less like a tomb and more like a home. One evening, while the sky burned orange, she sat by the door and said, "You ever think about leaving this place?" He looked at the horizon. "Every day." "But I never do." She smiled at that. "Maybe you were waiting for a reason to." He didn't answer, just stared at the fading sun. That night she woke to the sound of him crying out in his sleep, a soldier's nightmare. She ran to his side, finding him drenched in sweat, whispering names of the dead. Without thinking, she took his hand. "You're safe," she said softly. His eyes opened wild at first, then softened when he saw her. "You shouldn't see me like this," he muttered. She shook her head. "We all got ghosts, James. Yours just make you human again." The next morning, he found her sitting outside, watching the sunrise. She looked different somehow, stronger, though the scar on her thigh would never fade. "You were right," she said quietly. "They won't stop coming for me." He nodded, loading his rifle. "Then I'll be ready when they do." She turned to him, eyes full of something deeper than fear. "Why risk your life for me?" He gave a half smile. "'Cause if I don't stand for something good again, I'll forget what it feels like." She looked away, but he saw the tear she tried to hide. That afternoon, the air grew still. Too still. Even the birds had gone quiet. James stepped outside, scanning the hills. Then he saw them, 3 riders cutting through the dust, the sun glinting off their guns. "They found me," Elena whispered. He moved fast, tossing her a pistol. "Stay low. Don't miss." The riders circled the cabin, calling out her name. "You can give her up, soldier," one of them shouted. "Ain't worth dying for." James stepped into the open, rifle steady. "She ain't yours to take," the leader sneered. "You think one broken soldier can stop us?" James didn't answer. The first shot came quick and sharp. He dropped to one knee, fired back, and sent the man tumbling from his horse. The others scattered, circling wide. Bullets tore through the cabin walls, splintering wood. Elena fired from the window, her hands trembling but her aim true. One man fell, then silence, only the wind moving through the grass. The last outlaw shouted, "You're dead, soldier." "We'll bring more." James reloaded slowly, voice cold. "Then I'll bury more." The outlaw hesitated, eyes darting to the bodies, then turned his horse and rode hard into the horizon. When it was over, the world went quiet again. Smoke drifted from the rifle barrels, and the smell of gunpowder lingered in the air. James looked down at his arm. A graze, nothing more. Elena rushed out, tears streaking her dusty cheeks. "You're hurt," she said. He smiled faintly. "Not bad enough to stop me from making coffee." She let out a shaky laugh and hugged him tight. It was the first time either of them had let their guard down. For a long moment they stood there, 2 survivors bound by something neither fully understood, something like grace. In the days that followed, word of the shootout spread. The outlaws didn't come back. Maybe fear kept them away, or maybe fate had finally decided to give 2 weary souls a little peace. James fixed the cabin's roof, rebuilt the corral, and even planted a small patch of corn near the stream. Elena watched him work, her heart caught between gratitude and something warmer. One evening she asked, "What happens now?" He leaned on the fence, staring at the sunset. "Now we keep living. That's the hard part," she nodded. "Then I'll help you do it." Time softened the pain, though neither of them forgot where they'd come from. Sometimes, when the wind carried the scent of gunpowder or river dust, James would fall silent, remembering the day he found her. Elena would place her hand over his and whisper, "That day saved us both." Slowly, the soldier who'd once begged fate for peace began to smile again, not often, but enough to remind her he was still fighting to live. When spring came, wildflowers bloomed near the riverbank where they first met, as if the land itself remembered mercy. Years later, travelers would pass through that stretch of country and speak of the cabin by the Red River. They'd say a soldier lived there once, a quiet man with kind eyes, and a woman with a scar who laughed like sunlight. Some claimed they'd seen her tending the garden while he played an old tune on a harmonica. Others said they left together one summer and were never seen again. But those who